Welcome to Patrick's Scale Studio. My name's Patrick, and I'll be your host. This would be build video 2 for Trumpeter's 1/350th scale USS Langley CV-1. And we ended things on video 1 with a lot of parts cut out and assembled, but not painted, not ready yet to go onto the hull here. Additionally, we discussed a little bit about these 5-inch 51 caliber deck guns here. So I'd like to go ahead and get through that and show you what everything we've got prepped up here. So right now we'll leave it here on page 5, and I will show you these pieces here after paint. Okay, so went ahead and got everything painted up here that assembly wise that we put together last video. So we got these part B, which we make 2 of, so there's both of them right there, and they both have the Tamiya's sky gray on them. I'll hold those up here, and they're looking great. These parts are so incredibly delicate, but I really like how to scale it looks. I'm going to go ahead and put these down, and then we'll go ahead and look at assembly A here. These are all photo etched, no plastic here on these at all. Again, rather delicate here, and I don't want to handle them as much as possible because I prefer the paint and primer not coming off them. So go ahead and put those back. And for the time being, I usually store everything in little plastic disposable ramekins. So let me go ahead and get these moved, and we'll move on to page 6. So those parts from page 5, they are not used until much later on in the instruction booklet here. In fact, I believe it's not until we are ready to put down all of the lattice or scaffolding structure that goes underneath the flight deck. I have not yet made holes in the flight deck here. It says these are options, and I think it's mainly just for flagpoles. But did go ahead and last video we got these ship's boats put together. Well, I started on getting them painted. And so that so far is what we've got. Now if we look at the sides of the holes, there is nothing there. And there's no real direction in the instructions on what colors these are supposed to be. So I kind of went with the, I think there's a model, I think it's at the Smithsonian here, that is made in 1/96th scale, and that's what I went off of for color references here. I mean, if it's going to be at the Smithsonian, then it's probably a good chance that it's, 99% accurate and correct as to what the real thing might have been. But luckily these aren't used until much later on in the build of Langley as well, so I can paint these at my leisure. So far everything has been brush painted. I absolutely hate brush painting because for the most part I'm just really terrible at it, and everything usually requires a couple coats. So I'm particularly pleased with how these have turned out so far. So I'm going to go ahead and put these aside, and we'll move on to page 7. Alright, page 7 here. We had, if you'll remember, most of this is already put on this foredeck of Langley, but we had a couple of reels, these D24 parts that we had not attached, and I've gone ahead and got them snipped off. I'll show them how tiny they are. So at this point I still need to actually paint the hose or rope or whatever that is right up front on these reels before we paste them down to the deck. So we'll probably do that before we move on to page 8. But I'm going to go ahead and show off here assembly G under some paint. Again, Tamiya's sky gray. Put him aside. And then we got these 2 itty bitty anchors. The last anchors I remember working on were for USS Fletcher, and they were quite a bit bigger. So these are definitely smaller. But again, these don't go on until later on in the instructions. The only parts that I'm really concerned about getting onto the deck is going to be these 2 parts D24. So let me go ahead and get some paint stuff, and we'll get on that. Well, we're going to do our best to film actually painting these a little bit here, as best as I can here, dealing with focus and whatnot. I'm going to assume that these were reels for ropes, so I'm going to go with the, to me, is XF93. It's light brown, the DAC 1942. So this really is meant for the main base color of armor vehicles for the German army in Africa during World War II. However, I think I like the color for rope as well. I'm going to take a little bit of X28 thinner, and I'm just going to, come on, tap it in there. So thin paint flows so much better than a thick paint, especially at Tamiya. Tamiya is well known for not being great to brush paint with. And because I prefer Tamiya paint, it's probably why I hate brush painting things. I've got more Tamiya paint than I've got anything else. It's okay. Alright, so I'll go ahead and on this up. Now, if I take it out of frame, just scream and yell at me. I won't really be able to hear you, but you know, that doesn't stop any of us that watch sports from screaming and yelling at the TV when our favorite players are doing something we don't agree with, or the coaches are making a bad call. So everyone always tries to remind me that no, they can't hear me, but I like to think that they can. It's just the kind of thing that us Cincinnati Bengals fans deal with. Alright, let's see here. I've got 2 of these to go. They don't have to be, I don't need to put on a second coat or anything, but I am going to do the second one off camera. So exciting times here. We are actually going to be putting something onto USS Langley in this episode for the first time out of 2 build videos. These are the 2 reels, and I need to get them attached. As you can see right there, D24, D24, both going down into a pair of holes on each side. Instructions out of the way. Get this down here. The nice thing about the Tamiya paint on a warm evening, especially with a little bit of the thinner, is it happens to dry pretty quick. So I'm going to go ahead and touch these 2 little posts. So I had and be a standard trumpeter fit here, stubborn as ever. And I'm just pressing down on top so I can always come back and touch up that paint a little bit. So first one's on, go ahead and get the second one on. And I'm going to try this one a little bit differently here with going right to the holes in the deck. and then a little bit on the posts. And the hope is that it'll be a bit easier. And it absolutely was. Alright, so everything on page 7 is now complete. Let me put this aside and we'll move on. Okay, everything on page 8 had already been completed prior to even build video 1. So we're on to page 9. Everything here on this side of this has also already been completed here. I'm going to go ahead and point it out. You have various pieces here like bollards and fairleads, more fairleads, more bollards, more fairleads, more bollards. That's really all that is. So that is complete and that is done. What's going to concern us on this page right now is getting some of these bits and pieces in place, and we'll go ahead and get those gathered up and everything's patent and ready to go. Alright, I feel like I need to bring up a correction to something I said earlier, and just mainly it's due to forgetfulness on my part. So I had previously stated that everything on page 8 was complete. Well, that's not really truly the case because we have not yet gotten G50 into place on there. And the main reason behind that is just kind of waiting to get it painted, and I was actually also going to get the railing attached to it because it'll go in place a little bit easier. So at this time we're going to go ahead and get that. Now that railing that you see on this part right here, that does not actually take place until page 10, but it's just going to be a lot easier to get that railing in place on the part right here, and I can paint it at the same time. So go ahead and slide our Langley over here, and it basically goes just right there. And then I just press it into place. Now, I'm just about to do it right now because I don't have any cement or anything on there. And something you really got to be cognizant of is that railing is delicate. So I'll go ahead and get a little bit of the white Catamia on there. And we're just going to put it right on the very edge in the inside here, because we don't want any of this Tamiya cement oozing out onto the deck and causing a mess. Put that aside. And now that deck piece is in place, those railings are perfectly in place as well. And what that'll help us do is, with that in place, along with that railing, a lot of little pieces just went flying because I had them resting on the back there. Go ahead and wrangle those. Luckily nothing that was really fragile. But with that piece in place here, that'll give me a better idea when we get up here on page 9 now on where to set these ladders. And that is what we're going to do next. We've got the ladders are right back here. Now these ladders are unlike the 1/200 scale ladders in that they will deform very, very easily. But these ladders for the most part go right there. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little CA glue on those off camera. Have them both in place, and we'll come back and have a look. Alright, so close up here. Our two ladders are in place, and I'm glad I went ahead and got them in right now because they are just a touch delicate and fiddly. So brings us up to a couple of other pieces in our instructions here that we have to go ahead and get attached. The anchors, we'll be working on getting the anchors in today as well. I still got to figure out about the chain routing for the anchors, because We know that this is the windlass right here and the windlass assembly, and that is right here. And the anchor chains will come up and over here right there, but there's no hole for them to disappear into in the deck. Now, maybe someone can point out if my thinking is correct here. I think these two little spots right here on the deck, kind of where the windlass is going to sit, I think these are supposed to be holes for the anchor to go up around that drum on the windlass and then down into the chain locker through these holes right there. That's what I think right now. I've been looking, and there really is no pictures or anything like that of Langley's windlass that are very good. You can make out where the chains are going or anything like that. And I'm kind of leaning in the direction of that's what I'm going to do anyway. So we'll go ahead and start getting to work on some of these funnels. Alright, I'll move the CA glue out of the way before I glue myself to it. Alright, so in the back here we've got these two right here. These are E6 parts right here. I've got them painted. I left them attached to the sprue, just so I could have them with the little alligator clips and airbrush them at the same time as I was airbrushing a bunch of other parts. So at this point in time, we'll go ahead and separate them from the sprue. Alright, so lots of funnels on there. We've got 6, and there's still a couple more to add. So going with the kind of current theme of what we're doing right now, I'm going to continue working on the center, working my way out to both port and starboard here. So next up here, we are going to put into place G20 and G19. So G20 is right here. Now this part, Trumpeter did us the favor of molding the sprue connection point on the side of the funnel. Unlike all of the others where it's on the bottom and you just had to snip it off and call it a day. Now they molded this one with the sprue nib right there on the trunk of this funnel. So I get to clean it up a little bit. And then after we get it put into place, we'll have to do a little touch-up painting on it. So thank you for that, Trumpeter. So G20 right there. Go ahead and move them over. I need to actually fix that so that it's not so wobbly. But this part, G20, is going to go right here behind the windlass and the anchor chains and anchor locker. Just trying to make sure we don't have too much cement. So the actual touch-up painting might not be 100% necessary, because it looks like it might be on the inside and up against another part here, which is called out as G19, and it looks like a plastic stick. I'm not really sure what it is, what the purpose of it is, but it is literally just an absolute plain post. Which again, Trumpeter decided to mold with the sprue connection point on the side. So once again, lucky us. So we'll do a little bit of cleanup here. Nothing too terribly hard. Push it back into view. And just a little dab of extra thin in there. Again, not real sure what the point of that is, but it's on there and it's done. So our next piece here is going to be the windlass. And I had it upside down there. The windlass goes right there. There are two little slots right there. So we're going to go ahead and get this put into place with a little bit of medium CA. Let me go ahead and over here. Alright, so I've got my part secured in tweezers. Got a little bit of medium CA. I'm going to apply that to the tabs right here. It doesn't need a lot. Alright, and get this into place. And that's seated right into place beautifully. That is the most to-plan thing so far on this ship. So I'm real happy with that. After that, I gotta let this set up a little bit before I start fiddling with anything else close in, but there's this part G33 right here. Just itty bitty. And that goes into these two little holes right up front right there. So again, I gotta wait for the CA to cure up a little bit because it looks like the two wheels on this, come on, focus for us, go on the outside of the two wheels on this reel. Alright, so that has set up enough right there to put in part G33. So on this one, I'm going to actually apply the extra thin to the part itself. The holes are really tiny and right up on that windlass area. So just a little dab of the extra thin. And it goes right in place right there. So this is a really cool, really well detailed little area right there. It's too bad it's going to be a little bit difficult to see, but at least I know it's there, and if you're watching this, you'll know it's there. Okay, so next up is another funnel here, G21. These are just ventilation funnels. Besides the portholes on the side of the ship, and it is completely festooned with portholes up front and in the back. Imagine it'd probably get a little bit stuffy down there, so. Alright, so the last one of those is on and in place. And so now we can move on to these deck guns. And I got these primed and painted. if you saw my short, you'll know that the kit parts I did not care for. The aftermarket parts, which you also saw in the last video, I did not care for. Everything was warped, and I was able to get those barrels put back into straight cleanly. So I went ahead and 3D printed my own. There is a file, I can't remember, maybe it was CG Trader, and it was just a $9 STL file, already cheaper than any of the aftermarket sets I bought, and at this point I can print up as many of these in any scale that I choose. So I've got these now, and these are going to go into place right here. And because these are pretty accurate, they don't really fit in with the railing and everything that's going to go around. So these are going to be sitting inboard like so, because they won't actually clear the railings if I wanted to point them outboard. But that's exactly what they're going to look like right there. Go ahead and I'm going to put just a little bit of the medium CA right here. And then just a touch on the bottom of this. So getting these into an orientation for printing so that the barrels remain straight, the supports weren't too difficult to pull off, and the layer lines were decent and not overbearing. It definitely took a lot of different prints, test prints, just to get it down there. But also, I am proud to say that I was able to set my printer and get the print layers to 25 microns. If you're familiar with 3D printing, that in itself is quite a feat. So just kind of pounded my own chest on that one. I was really happy with how that worked out. Alright, so our 5-inch 51 caliber guns are in place. So the only thing left we really have to put into this right now for page 9 are the anchors and the railings. I really abhor doing railings on camera because I like to be as close to this as possible with my hands steady, and it's really makes for a bad video content. The anchors, on the other hand, though, let's kind of turn this to the side here. You're going to go in there, but the holes are going to need a little bit of shaping because the anchors sit out like that, and I would rather them be a little bit more flat to the hull. So what it looks to me is I just need to get a like a rotary tool or carve out a little bit of that in there. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll touch base here with getting the anchors on. Alright, so let's go ahead and get these anchors in place here. I'm going to rest the ship like this. I'm going to get a little more CA. I'm not real clear on what Trumpeter is thinking here on these instructions as to how they would have you put these anchors in, but I'm going off of what I saw online. So I'm just going to take some of this medium CA, put it right toward the top. I don't know why I'm bothering with tweezers. Mainly we just want to get that shank glued into place. And that's kind of what we're looking for right there. Turn it over. And do the same thing over here. Now mind you, I had to, on both of these hose pipes, I had to take my little rotary tool. Just a little display rotary tool, and I kind of had to grind away at the top of these hose pipes, because the very top, where it was very, very thick plastic, and the anchors, instead of laying flat against the hole, stuck out real badly. So alright, so anchors are now done, which leaves us just to the railing. Oh, no, never mind. The railings are on the next page here. So this right here, all of the instructions for this right here are complete, which moves us up to page 10. Zoom out a little bit. Alright, so page 10. Now we're putting in the railings. And the one railing we already have in place, which is on the top of this little deck house right there. So I've got 2 more railings to go right there for this particular portion of it. And then I've got a couple ladders, more railings, and stuff here on the stern, including a couple more 5-inch guns. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of the railings off camera. And we've already seen the ladders go down in the previous step, so railings and ladders I'll get taken care of off camera. Alright, let's go ahead and have a look at the railings and the ladders before we move on. So here is the railing up at the bow. That's 2 pieces right there. And then there's the ladders that we put on camera. And back here, the 2 ladders right there along with the railing. And then we've got another railing right there. So all in all, I'm pretty pleased with how those went on. A lot easier to get stuff like that done off camera than on camera. That's why I try to steer away from doing any kind of railings and stuff like that on camera, because a lot of chance for things to go wrong, especially if I'm not right on top of it. So a couple other things here we're going to point out. Let me move this aside and have a look at the instructions again. I think we're going to go ahead and drill holes through these 2 circular parts right here on the instructions. It's right there, and on the ship it is just forward of one of these drums, and we're going to go ahead, as it says, put the chains on. We're going to wrap the chains around that drum and feed them into there, and then the other end into these hose pipes right there. So go ahead and get out some bits. I'll get those drilled, and we'll touch base when we get those in place. One of the benefits here of the aftermarket set made by Trumpeter for USS Langley is it includes an already blackened chain versus the bright copper one. As you can see here with the tip of my Tamiya tweezers, it's pretty small stuff. Now, it's not a studded anchor chain, but as I understand, those are not easy to deliver in 1/350th scale, nor is it terribly apparent. So we've already gotten one of the anchor chains put in. Now, they're not glued in place or anything, but this is how I went about doing it. I drilled the holes out right there, like I said I was going to do, and go ahead and feed a couple loops of this chain into there. And sometimes you got to use some tweezer force. Wrap it around loosely and then feed it into the hose pipe. And you can continue just to kind of feed it in there, and eventually things will tighten up. And so now I'm at a look that I'm pretty happy with. So I'm just going to apply some thin CA to lock that in place, and the anchor chains will be finished. Alright, anchor chains are both glued into place here. I'll pick it up and get a little close up. So it's kind of hard with the light, but you can just barely make out where they go into the chain lockers. And with a little bit of thin CA. They're both in place, and I'm happy with how they look. So that brings us up to the last area of this episode here, and it is the stuff on the stern. So we will start toward the hardest to reach place here in the middle and work our way aft, and then we will go with the two 5-inch guns on either side there. So go ahead and get started. So G22. Now it's important to remember that when we put G22 in, it's facing toward the bow, not toward the stern. So let me go ahead and dig out G22. Again, thank you, Trumpeter, for putting the sprue nib right there on the trunk of this funnel. I'm going to go ahead and get them cut off, and go ahead and clean them up. And we'll do some touch-up painting on this after we get it in place. Just a teeny tiny little hairy stick. I'll do the trick. And for the most part, you're not even really going to see a lot of this detail. But again, as modelers, we know it's there. And we're doing this for ourselves and not so much for everybody else. Go ahead and a little extra thin. Okay. Fantastic. Immediately wants to lean. Straighten them up a little bit. Okay, so I'm happy with that's how that's positioned. So next up is, I believe this is different than the anchor at front. This is a capstan and not a windlass. And there are no stern anchors modeled on this. But that's not to say that it couldn't have happened. So there's the windlass, give you a little idea of what it looks like. Or I said windlass, this is a capstan. It goes right up here. It is perfect. It's in place, and got some more funnels here, F6, before we get to the two E8 funnels, putting in here right now. Alright, so next up we've got assembly G right there. I just happen to have that handy, and that is going to go right there. So I'm going to get a little bit of the white cap cement. And it's kind of nice, these little searchlights on top of it are almost like little grab handles. Alright, so I got some of the white cap cement on there. Alright, so that is in place. Now I believe, again, as strange as it sounds, I think that is a pigeon house for carrier pigeons for communications. Don't ask me, I read it on Wikipedia. Alright, so last step that we're going to work on here, the last thing to complete on page 10 and for this video is going to be these two 5-inch guns, just like the ones up front. I'm going to go ahead and get them into place. So start off, I need to a nice fresh little dab of medium CA. And I can't recommend it enough. If you can order these teeny tiny little ramekins, they're just like little plastic ramekins, disposable ramekins, and you can get them in gigantic packs for fairly inexpensive. Definitely recommend those because they're great for flipping over and holding CA glue like that. They're also very handy for mixing up paint. Alright, so a little bit of CA. Now the instructions show these facing aft, so we'll go ahead and do the same. And again, they're going to be trained inboard, just for the simple fact that they won't clear the railings. So a little bit of medium CA there on the deck, a little bit here on the base of the 5-inch gun. Oh, you know what we don't want to do is get them in the way of, there we go. So it was almost in the way of where one of the lattice-like pillars are going to be going for the flight deck. So looks like this right here is just the perfect sweet spot right there. It would be right in between this column and where the railing's going to be. Alright, so on to the last one. Alright, there we go. That's in place, folks. And that will wrap up any of the assembly here on this video. So we've gotten up to page 10 done. In our next video, it might be a little bit more disjointed because what we're going to start doing here is fitting out the deck. Now the aftermarket set that I purchased, made by Trumpeter, starts off with the underside of this deck. This is the top side of it right there. Where these flag poles and staffs are going in, along with some more ladders, and these are wind barriers. But the aftermarket set starts with this upside down so that you can start attaching some of the netting that goes all the way around this deck. Additionally, we want to start working on getting this lattice like scaffolding framework completed. We're going to do both the photo etch set from the aftermarket set, and we're also going to do the plastic, just so as we go we can kind of measure up how it looks on the deck. And this advice was brought to me by a viewer on the last video, and I really appreciate that advice. I think it's a good. Go ahead and get this plastic set up, make sure it fits. That way we can try to exactly mirror what's going on with the plastic with the photo etch here. So, and we'll test fit as we go. But it's going to be important to start getting this together sooner rather than later. And then later on in another video, we'll start jumping into some of this superstructure fun. A lot of railings, a lot of ladders, a lot of teeny tiny little parts. But until that time comes around, please stay safe and happy modeling.